Well, over the last year, South Africa has seen a host of international comedy acts visiting our shores, while at the same time we have been exporting some great comedy acts into the international market. So in the cover story this week, Finweek looks at the economics of the comedy industry here in South Africa and whether anybody is making a real living from it. Joining me in studio, as I said, Marc Ashton, Finweek Editor, Lisa Illingworth, a Finweek Journalist. We've also got Joe Parker, comedy club owner, and Darren Maule, comedian, actor and breakfast show host. Thanks for joining us today. Very quickly, Marc, let's just start off with you because we're looking at the performing arts across the show today. We're talking about the film industry as well, and some great talent in South Africa, but we know it's certainly a tough industry to make a good living from.
Sure, I mean, I think that's one thing that I find fascinating about this is I love the idea of homegrown talent. I love the idea of people being able to make a living doing something they're very good at. You know, we've seen a lot of big businesses. SAB Miller is a good example where they've been able to commercialize a product and it's been able to go mass market. But the idea of making South African talent, lack of entrepreneurial stories, the idea of just being able to build something that's South African and be able to export it. You know, we haven't had an investment in performing arts, and I use that as a very broad term. It's movies, it's stage productions, and just suddenly in the last year and a bit, it really seems to have been in the headlines. We've seen good South African acts going overseas. We've seen Trevor Noah featured on Jay Leno's show. We've seen foreigners coming to South Africa, and they're packing out. And I think people are really loving the idea of being able to go and experience something that is not happening anymore. And I mean, I remember when I was reading the story, I remember going to Hurricanes 10 or 15 years ago, and we used to have a fabulous time out when we were there. And it just seems to have sort of died off a little bit, and then it's just sort of some resurgence that seems to be happening in the industry.
Is there a resurgence, Darren? I mean, you've spent some time, you've been in stage, theatre, kind of across the board, multi-talented. But in the comedy industry, do you think that it's specifically having a revival and entering the next phase?
Definitely entering the next phase. I do remember, and so does Joe, the early days of hysterics. And there was this realization amongst comedians and entertainers, and also amongst the public that, hang on, we're funny. And we can make money from it. And back then it was tax-free.
Don't tell us that loudly. Something you whisper off air.
Oh yeah, yes. And then of course, I don't think there was a dip in it, but I think there was a learning curve. And now there's, I think, so many youngsters are realizing that they can do it, and so many audience members are realizing that we are funny and that they are willing to invest and come and watch local comedy.
So what does it take to be sustainable as a comedian? I mean, what are the elements right now? What have we learned in terms of how you make a living from this? Is it becoming more professional, understanding the financial aspect of marketing your brand? Or tell us from your experience.
Rule number one is you genuinely have to be funny. You get guys occasionally, every now and again, they'll be funny. And no, it just doesn't work. You literally actually need to have funny bones. It needs to be in your genes, in your makeup. You need to be funny. And then rule number two, you need to love it, intimately, passionately. If you're doing comedy to put bread on the table, firstly, you're a hungry comic, so you're not going to be funny. And secondly, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You need to do it because it's in your DNA, and you love it, and you're passionate about it, and you wouldn't do anything else anyway. And then, strangely enough, this weird thing happened where everyone wanted what you were giving, and you can make a very good living from it. So, yeah, be funny, and you'll love it, and then you'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, Lisa, you obviously wrote the story right now. Yep. So what do you take away from it when you spoke to various people in the industry? You spoke to Darren, you spoke to Joe. What do you take away from what we need to know about making and helping to grow the comedy industry?
I think the public takes it for granted that these people are naturally talented and that all they do is they get up on stage and they present you with their material and it's automatically funny. But the preparation that goes into that material, the preparation to actually get on stage is far more than what we as the public actually see. We're oblivious to what happens in running a comedy club, in booking the acts, going from an open spot, you know, that 5 to 7 minute spot that gets given to a newbie where he has to sort of test his material on the audience, from moving on to actually being booked and then becoming an actual recognized act in South Africa. I mean, that whole process of going through all those motions, I think the public is oblivious to what it actually takes for a comedian to get from that open spot to Jay Leno.
I mean, I always say that it's the toughest job being a comedian out of all the performing arts, because it kind of, you're rare up on screen there. Everything is laid bare. You have to be funny, as you say. I mean, you know, presenters, actors, everything, they're hiding behind a mask, but you're laid bare as a comedian. So, of course, you have to have that talent. Joe, tell us about your experience. You've been seen as a paternal figure in the industry, and you've bred, if some could say, many comedians. Tell us about your experience in comedy.
Well, I've been doing it a long time. So when I started, it was very different to what it is now, in the sense that there weren't that many people doing it. But if we're going to stay current here, I mean, Lisa's right, there's a whole process that's involved with somebody who wants to get involved in stand-up comedy. And what my involvement in it at this point of my career, or life, whatever you like to call it, is providing that permanent stage where people can access the industry. There's a touch point for the public, which there hasn't really been with any consistency over the years. I mean, you know, where would you go? I mean, I don't know whether you go and watch stand-up comedy, but when you start going, it's something that you will do on a more regular basis, because of the fact there's so much talent around, and the environment is very conducive. Where we have our clubs, you know, it's safe parking, very accessible. So, you know, we're in that sort of part of it.
You're, you know, making it accessible, making comedy accessible. But do comedians make their money by, you know, having a 5-minute stand-up act at a Joe Parker club, or do they make their money through endorsements? I mean, tell us where. I mean, Darren can also add to this, but your views on that.
Okay, well, you could probably the best example would probably be someone like Trevor Noah, because Trevor Noah has done what no comedian in this country has done before. He's cracked it on the international scene, and in a big way. You know, really good American comedians don't get onto Jay Leno and David Letterman. He's managed to do that. So he went through open spots at other venues we used to manage. He started going on stage, doing 5 minutes, getting no pay. I don't think his endorsement of Cell C did him any harm. I think he got a huge amount of profile out of that. But he's an incredibly talented guy. You know, that's what Darren was talking about, having that ability to be funny. Trevor is incredibly talented. And he's able to adapt that ability and that style and his content to an international market, which has made it easier for him to work overseas. I think most of the comedians in this country are still very colloquial, and it's very hard to take that material and make it interesting for audiences around the world.
I actually remember Trevor's open spot when Joe and I, before the first Parkers at Parker's Comedy and Jive. And we were doing a lot of satellite gigs throughout South Africa. Often we would drive to Bloem and literally drive to Cape Town, stay there for a few days, and then come back and drive to Durban and drive to all over the country. And one of the regular spots we used to go to every Thursday was somewhere in Dax in Pretoria. And Joe phones me up and says, "Yeah, there's this new guy. Same name as Gumbi. Yeah, Trevor. That's it. I want you to watch him. Let me know." He was doing it in the open spot tonight. And so I do the usual. Okay, you got 5 minutes, 7 max. If you go over 7, I'm going to cut your mic, and then I'm going to cut the light, and then I'm going to throw something at you.
Off, yeah.
It's the same thing. You never know. And then his first time up there, he was 2 minutes into his set. And I phoned Joe and I said, "Joe, yeah, we can book this guy. This guy's got it. He's got it all."
He's going to make it.
It was his first time I'd ever seen him as an open spot. And you just knew. And you can, half the time, I think Joe will agree with me, half the time you can, or 90% of the time, you can tell from a comic's first 2 or 3 minutes on stage, this guy's got it, or he has it, or he's going to work the rest of his life to try and get it.
Joe, one of my questions though is that one of the anecdotal feedback we have, we were chatting about around the office, is that comedy as a destination almost feels like you're seeing the same people, the same names and faces. Are there new bodies actually coming through? Are you going to see new material if I come in week after week?
Okay, my question to you, Mark, you haven't been to the club?
Not recently, no.
No, all right. That's the perception we're up against, because I think there is a perception out there that there's about 6 or 7 comedians in this country who are on television all the time and who get to do these big shows. Yep. We recycle 80 comedians over a 3-month period at the club in Monte Cassino. And this, when I say 80 comedians, you know, are all of varying ability and talent. But out of those guys, the guys who work hard and who have the innate talent, they're the guys who are going to be the Trevor Noahs and the Louis Segolas and the Riyad Mousas of the future. They need that time in front of a structured or an audience that is expecting comedy, who are there to be entertained and want to laugh. So when I say 80, I really mean it's growing all the time. You know, I mean, we're running an open mic competition now. We have 40 new guys who've never been paid going on stage to get one spot on a comedy festival. So there's a lot of people out there who want to do it, and there's already a lot of guys who can do it.
And by guys, Joe also means girls.
Yeah,
Because at the moment we're seeing a
couple
lot of entry of women into comedy. Well, not a lot of entry, but there is some entry. I mean, more than there's ever been before.
The problem is all over the world, there are less women doing it than men. I can't for the life of me begin to understand that, but it's a fact all over the world that there are less women.
Yeah.
What about the role of social media? I was following you on Twitter, and the role of social media in building brands for comedians or broadly performing artists. How much has it changed your career?
I've kind of been very lucky in my career in that I've had many, many different outlets from TV and radio and clubbing. And I'm relatively new to social media, but I have noticed in other fledgling careers that social media really has helped. They're making people are becoming more aware of their comedy, of their style. You have the likes of little Skulk Bezuidenhout, who is creating 20 to 50 to 100 followers every day on Twitter and on Facebook, and he's got lots of quirky little comments, and he uses the social media to put his personality out there, so that the uninitiated will look at that and go, oh, this guy's funny, and he's going to be in Joburg or in Durban or in Cape Town, and he's doing a comedy show. I'd like to go and see him. So I think we're just beginning to get a taste of what the social media can do. I think it's a powerful tool.
So give us your experience, because ultimately to be a successful actor, a successful performing artist, you have to be strategic, because you can have your 15 minutes and then your 15 minutes can be up very quickly. So when was that moment when you thought, okay, right now I need to think about seeing myself as a business, seeing myself as a brand, and give us some insight into how you started thinking more strategically about yourself as a business?
Well, I'm actually quite lucky in that I didn't have to do that.
You're just the lucky one.
I kind of cheated.
All these actors out there are saying,
no, I did. I kind of cheated. I diversified hugely. I even started stand-up comedy the wrong way around. Most people get into stand-up by doing an open spot, then they get a bit of time on stage, 10 minutes, then they get to MC, and then they get to diversify. I did it the other way around. I started as a diverse actor. For the first 3 years, I didn't even speak on stage. I was the mime to a comedy duo where Brendan did the sound effects and the houseboys, and I did the mime. And then the MC didn't show up, and they said, Darren, will you MC? And I'm like, how must I do that as Marcel Marceau? You know, I'm the mime. And then I got a voice, and then I started MCing, and then I did some stand-up comedy, and then I did some TV stuff, and then I did some film, and I did some writing, and now I'm the breakfast show host on East Coast Radio.
But what I'm hearing is diversity. Your eggs aren't all in one basket.
Well, I'm lucky that way, but if you do want to, I don't think you can at this stage. And how many stand-up comedians anywhere in the world actually make a living purely from their stand-up? Even the likes of Eddie Izzard does TV, and then you have the likes of Eddie Murphy. Oh yes, and so you have people who write books, who do parody, who do comedy. There's not too many people that do just stand-up comedy to make a living, or to make a living. So I think the rule there is you do need to diversify. So I wouldn't be able to answer the question as far as how would you be able to make a strategy for yourself and market your brand as a stand-up comedian outside of that.
But I mean, what is interesting, obviously, is we need more outlets, because ultimately we know that there's a few shows a year where you can go watch all the top comedians in South Africa, you can rent DVDs, but you want more Parker comedy clubs, ultimately. I mean, if you go to New York, there's so many comedy clubs, it's part of the culture. So do you have any more plans to open up some more? I mean, is this something that will grow in South Africa, do you think?
Absolutely. I think that initially the main centres, Johannesburg, Durban and Cape Town, would, certainly Durban and Cape Town would support a comedy club each. And then there would be smaller places that, that grow up in maybe the smaller towns or cities, which might not be a full-on comedy club, might just be one night a week type of thing. But there is such a demand out there for people to be able to go and sit and have a drink somewhere and have a good laugh. So that's, the reason why comedy clubs will always be successful.
Yeah. Is that what's fueling a lot of the demand? And we've said it, anecdotally, it again appears that there's a lot of international acts suddenly deciding South Africa is a place to come and perform. And obviously it makes commercial sense if they're coming out here at the moment. Why are they seeing us as a destination?
Well, because of the economy. It's like the digital music thing. The guys can't make as much music out of selling CDs now, so they've got to get back on the road. And I think the same applies in comedy all over the world, as guys who were used to being able to take advantage of the opportunities, economic opportunities in their own countries, are now realizing those opportunities have shrunk, and they've looked at other markets. That's why you're seeing so many big touring acts coming at you, comedians coming at you. I don't think they see this as a career move. It's a small market. They come here because the money is here, and they take advantage of that.
Yeah.
And flip.
I was going to talk to Darren about going international, but if you want to follow up.
Yeah, well, I think it was going to be my question was, how do it seems like something that we can possibly export. Obviously, Africa is quite a big opportunity as an investment destination. Africa often gets painted as one great big continent, but what about opportunities on the rest of the continent for South Africans to move into?
There is. We've had a Comedy Central film at the club once a month over the last 16 months, and we had a guy from Nigeria come down, a guy by the name of Basketmouth.
Right.
And he's incredibly funny. So, between South Africa and Nigeria, I would imagine, because we've both got fairly developed economies, there is a natural, I would imagine there's a natural way for us to share that comedy, the industry. We've had a lot of South Africans have gone up there and done one-nighters and things. I've done them in Zimbabwe and Zambia and Uganda. But definitely there's an opportunity. I think there's a huge opportunity in a city like Lagos to have a comedy club. They have their own structured comedy system up there where they've got nights dotted all over the city. But I don't know of any established venue where they have comedy 4 to 5 nights a week.
Also, to answer that question, I think you're going to see a wonderful, brand new type of explosion. See, traditionally you had stand-up comedy was in English. So you had American stand-up in English, UK, and it was in English. And then when we started seeing these stand-ups get up on stage, and I have an understanding of stand-up comedy from how I watched it growing up, and it was English, and it was English American or English. And the first time I saw a black South African do comedy in vernac, and the audience loved it, and they went mad, and I went, I've never seen this before. You can't get this DVD. And then we have, we now have small little satellite comedy venues in the townships, and the people are loving it, and watching young black comedians do comedy in their home language. I mean, I'm watching them in Zulu and Xhosa and in their own languages, and I'm thinking, this is unheard of. And then we're going to have the first 1-hour Zulu stand-up comedy DVD. It's going to happen. And the Xhosa one, and then the different languages, and then cross-pollination throughout Africa. I really think we're in such an exciting place right now. Cross-pollinating with Nigeria at this stage is a natural fit, and from there it's just going to get even bigger.